Through the forum, we hope to figure out what is the what next step and how we can contribute to figure out how to bring forth this call of action, right? And for clarification and context, this shortage is a national thing. It's not just Callen-Lorde trying to stop or facilities are trying to stop estrogen. It is a national thing that is creating crisis. And again, my name is Nala Simone, if I didn't say that before. I am a prevention coordinator at Callen-Lorde for transgender services. A further ado, I'm gonna have the panelists introduce themselves. Yeah.
Hello, hi. My name is Lara Comstock, and I'm from Callen-Lorde as well. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm the director of nursing. And I hope to be able to fill in some of the gaps about what we know about the shortage. I have a little bit of information. Most of it's available on the sheets that are by the door, but we can kind of go over that. And I really hope to come out of this with some further steps and find out what people, like what direction should we take and where should we put the resources to reverse what's happening.
Is this on? Yes. Okay. I'm Asa Radix. I'm a physician at Callen-Lorde. I'm also the director of research and education. And I think what I'm going to do is maybe if people have questions about alternative estrogens and things like that that can be used, at least in the short term, or and again, we have a lot of this information, I believe, in the back. But okay.
Hi, my name is Zil Goldstein. I am the program director at the Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery at Mount Sinai. And I'm here also as a clinician. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I can sort of talk about what the work that I've been doing with my patients to help make sure that there's no interruption in care.
So if there's any questions now, you can start writing them down. I'm just gonna say my name again, Nala Simone. PGPs are she's and hers. Laura, if you can just tell us a little bit of background information of what has been happening as we found out about the shortage of estrogen. Yeah.
So I actually don't have a timeline. I apologize for that, but from my memory, it was about 2 months ago that this has been going on. So at Callen-Lorde, we found out really very suddenly. So for us, what happened was we stopped receiving any 40 milligram per milliliter dosage first, and that was I would estimate about 6 months ago or so, maybe even 8 months ago. And then we started getting 20 milligram per milliliter, and we really didn't have any explanation for why that was happening. We were told it was a manufacturing issue and that it would be back, but it did not come back. And then very, very suddenly, the 20 milligram per milliliter stopped being available. We found out about it, and then it was like suddenly we could not get it. And that was the pharmacy and the clinic. We actually have different distributors for the pharmacy and for the clinic, and it happened at the same time. We were not able to get it. So then we started getting very worried, and we started kind of calling around and trying to find out information. There's really not a lot of information to be had right away. And, we were told at that time that it would maybe be September is what we first heard. And then we heard October. And the latest that I have heard is that it's fall or winter or fourth quarter of 2016. But nobody can say like exactly what that means. And so Kimberly Smith, I don't know Kim's exact title, but she basically does advocacy for Callen-Lorde. And so she contacted this company called Endo. It's a parent company of PAR, which makes is it the generic or sorry?
They make the brand name.
The brand name,
right,
yeah.
Right. And what they said was that one of the ingredients, the manufacturer stopped making one of the ingredients. We don't know if it's actually the estrogen or another ingredient that's in the formulation. That's unavailable, that information. But they had to get a different company to make the actual ingredient. And so they have said that they have manufactured already the 3 strengths, 10 milligram, 20 milligram, and 40 milligram, but that they're being held from releasing it by the FDA because they need FDA approval because they put a new ingredient in it. So that's the latest that I have heard and that I know. So we can go from that as to like what we think we should do. My personal opinion is trying to find out or pressure the FDA to accelerate that process. And I was also told, and I don't know if this is true, that there are not a lot of people who are doing the work of in the FDA to do these approvals. Like there's 5 or 6 people in the whole country, and that's a really scarce resource. So I think, personally, I think, you know, one thing we could do is try to put pressure so that that process gets speeded up, because this is obviously a really crucial thing that needs to happen. It's not okay that there's absolutely no injectable estrogen on the market. So that's what I know. But oh yes, thanks. I'm not a good public speaker, so I apologize. I
Doing
forget
fine.
things.
You're
But
doing all right.
so we also did a sign-on letter, and that's in the back. And please do sign on to it. It is for both PAR and Perrigo, who are the 2 manufacturers of the brand name and generic estrogen, which at this time, neither of those companies is making injectable estrogen. So the sign-on letter is specifically about the 40 milligram per milliliter, because that's the one that's been out of stock for longest and the one that most people use, although not everybody, obviously. And so we wanted to put some pressure on them to manufacture it. But I think with this new information about the FDA, I think that's another direction we can go in. But this is a place to start to try to put some pressure on them to get that moving.
So Asa, you said earlier you can give a little bit about alternative and what that may look like. Do you mind sharing with the folks?
Yeah, so obviously it's quite important. We don't want anyone to go without their hormones if folks are on hormones. So, you know, people might feel that it's possible to go out and get it maybe outside of a pharmacy setting. And I just wanted to give you a caution about that, because I have had some clients get injectable something out, you know, from somewhere I don't even know, and were actually injected with something that wasn't estrogen. So I think, you know, you have to be really careful if you're getting estrogen, that you know where it comes from. I'm sure some people have stocks of the vials, but, you know, definitely not to go somewhere where you possibly don't know the person or trust where it's coming from. There are other alternatives. I mean, the estrogen also comes in tablet form, and it also comes in a patch form. So a patch is like a sticky, almost like a Band-Aid, right? That actually has the estrogen in it, and it's slow release. So there you can kind of convert. Like if you're used to taking the 40 milligrams, like a 1 cc every 2 weeks, that's kind of roughly equivalent to about 8 milligrams of the tablet, and you know, and doubling up on patches. So there are equivalents, and we do have some information on that, I believe, in the back as well. And those are still in stock, right? You can still get estrogen tablets in the pharmacy, and you can still get patches. I know it's not ideal, because if you're used to using a particular type of estrogen, you probably want to continue that. But it's definitely better than kind of just stopping and being on nothing, or injecting with something that you don't know where it's from. So those are just like yeah, oh right, and there's also compounding. Thank you. So there are some pharmacies that will, they're called compounding pharmacies, like Strohecker's, for example.
Yep.
And I think we have names of some others that will actually formulate injectable estrogen. It's the same strength. They can make the 40 milligrams. Unfortunately, because it's not through a traditional pharmacy, a commercial pharmacy, it will not be paid for by insurance, but it is possible to pay for it out of pocket.
Well, a lot of my patients use different pharmacies because I'm not a Callen-Lorde provider. And for about, I would say, 3 weeks after the shortage was announced, there were commercial pharmacies all over the city that just had estrogen in stock, and my patients weren't having a problem getting their hormones there. That's stopped. I'm seeing that less and less. I think I have a few folks who have tried to call around to different pharmacies and aren't able to find it anymore. And I've also noticed that some of the compounding pharmacies, when you talk to them about everything, can they make your prescription for you? What strength? How are you going to get them the prescription? When you call the pharmacy, make sure to ask if they will work with your insurance company. Some of the pharmacies won't even bill insurance, and they just expect everyone to pay out of pocket. So just when you're going down that list and looking at those pharmacies, that can be an important question.
Sure. How is everyone? My name is Joyce Morales. I've been training at the center for 5 years now, and I'm sorry I'm a little late, but thank you. And
Tell me a little bit about affiliation, or tell us a little bit about affiliation.
well, at the center, I've been doing outreach, prevention, the drop-in group, bilingual.
Awesome. So, okay, one of the questions that I have is, has the injectable estrogen shortage impacted incarcerated trans women in different ways than non-incarcerated trans women? Is there any support structure in place to communicate shortage issues with them? Is anyone from the panelists? And if you need time to process, I can read another one and read them out and process your answer. Yeah. Want me to read another one?
I mean, I only know very little about that, and I did hear from a medical provider at Callen-Lorde that another medical provider in Georgia who works in a prison did communicate with the Callen-Lorde medical provider and tell him that they're also experiencing the shortage inside the prison there. So that's the only thing that I can speak to. I don't know what kind of support is happening there, but if anybody else has other information they want to share, yeah.
My name is Raina, and I work for Callen-Lorde. I actually was just this weekend at Clayton Correctional Facility upstate with somebody that we are currently supporting who's incarcerated, and they said that all the girls there were notified of the shortage, and they didn't switch on the sticks. And they're like, good. I mean, as good as we can do. And that's good.
Awesome. Thank you, Raina.
I'm just going to share. For folks who don't know, the Sylvia Red Law Project has a prisoner justice project that provides legal support and health advocacy for folks who are in like the trans housing unit, which Rikers has, and throughout New York State. And so I don't think like I can speak to that, but if folks have questions or want to know more about how folks who are incarcerated are being impacted by hormones, please like get in touch with Sylvia Red Law Project or let me know so we can connect you to resources, or if you know folks on the inside, you can also add them to our mailing list and send them as well.
All right. So next question, it's a dual question. So why did it take 8 or more months to respond to this shortage? And what new ingredient was added, and why change it? Next one is, why is there a shortage at Callen-Lorde but not at other healthcare providers, et cetera, et cetera? I see CK Life and CHN.
So there is a shortage at other health, well, the healthcare providers, but also the pharmacies. I think what we experienced was that we ran out earlier than other places, and we think it's because we get a lot more estrogen in, and we ran out more quickly because we use it really quickly. And Yes.
900 patients,
Yeah.
that's what I read.
Exactly, or more, yeah. So, we use it really quickly, we get it really often, and then suddenly we weren't getting it. And then as far as the, I think that the first part of the question is when the 40 milligram, stopped coming, why did it take so long to respond to that? Because we were still able to get the 20 milligram, and we kept being told that it was coming back, but then it just didn't come back, and then suddenly there was nothing. So that was kind of how that happened.
Alright. How long do you need to be off of estrogen before you can see the work reversed?
So I think that everyone is different, and everyone's been on a different dose and has a different body type and has been on it for different amounts of time. So I have some folks who were on estrogen for a long time, and maybe they've been off estrogen for several years, and actually they're they still have breast growth, and they're still their body shape hasn't changed, and other people might stop it for a much shorter period of time and see a reversal of some of their body changes. The kind of mental health and emotional issues, those changes happen very early on. So people can feel depressed and sometimes feel moody and just feel out of whack, fatigue. And those types of changes happen a lot more often and more frequently. But the body changes depending, it differs from person to person.
Sure. So, I see you have a question, let me.
Actually becoming. Sorry.
So the changes that you'll probably see reverse the fastest are, aside from the mental health effects, face shape, any sort of subcutaneous fat redistribution. That's the main thing that you would see change. So that can relate to hips or butt or thighs and the shape of the face. So those are also all things that are going to come back after starting estrogen. I've had patients who have stopped estrogen who have seen those changes as quickly as a month after they stopped taking estrogen, and as long as 6 months to a year afterwards. It does happen gradually, so it's a question of degree and at what point you notice rather than whether or not it's happening and how quickly it happens. But it also, and age, going back on hormones will cause those effects again, so it's not lost forever. And even if you're switching to another type of estrogen, those effects aren't lost forever.
Alright, so I'm gonna ask two short questions at the same time. Alright, so is injecting hormones more effective than other methods? Is a shortage expected on the black market? And to join that question, right, that last one is, would you guys see patients that are getting their estrogen from an alternative market? What would that look like?
Well, obviously, they would probably get it from a seller overseas, which could contribute to vials that have been put in with other, God knows what, chemicals, so you can mess up liver. There could be liver damage if you don't know what you're really injecting.
And I can kind of speak to the getting patients alternative market. I think what tends to happen, although like there is an option of alternative market, what ends up happening, we don't know what's in those medications. So what can happen is a liability on Callen-Lorde if something was to happen in the effect of providing you the injectable, the alternative. Does anyone else want to speak to the other two questions? So the other two questions is injecting hormones more effective than other methods? Is a shortage expected on the black market?
So, with regards
regards to alternative sources of estrogens, I do manage folks who have been getting estrogen elsewhere. Usually it's cheaper to get it through a pharmacy. Estrogen pills are not super expensive. It's usually about $20 a month for someone who's taking 6 milligrams a day. There's probably going to be a shortage on the black market or in alternative markets. The question is whether or not the people who are selling estrogen in those markets are going to acknowledge that, or if they're just going to be selling things that look like estrogen. So that's one question that comes up a lot when people are getting sort of alternative sources, is how do we tell what that estrogen actually is? And that's another reason that it is helpful to get things through a pharmacy where there's more quality control in place.
So I just want to circle back to one of the questions we kind of missed, and sorry about that, folks. So the question was, what's the new ingredient that was added and why? If we do know, they would like to know what is the new ingredient, and just for context, probably even know what is the ingredient in the estrogen. If we do know, if we don't know, is there any resources that we can provide to them to get more information about that?
We don't know, I don't know what the new ingredient is. What it says is that, Par Pharmaceutical they're awaiting FDA approval of a new API, which stands for Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient Supplier. So they're waiting for, approval of the new active ingredient supplier. What that active ingredient is, we actually don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think just to explain a bit, the pharmaceutical companies, I think it's just like, building a car. You get parts from different places. So you might get the wheels from here and the steering wheel and the glass. And, so they do the same thing. They're creating the injectable estrogen, but there are components within it that come from different places. So whenever you change your supplier, it's like it's a completely new drug, and that's why the FDA has to now approve it. If that analogy makes sense.
Alright, so I'm going to try to combine the questions that I'm reading ahead. So, one of the questions are, what trans advocacy groups are out there raising awareness about this? How do we get actively involved and making sure we get the medicine we need? And to circle back to a question that's kind of tied in, it said, should we address this shortage as a preventative measure for the person who wrote this question with okay, yeah, right, okay. Excuse me, breakdown. All right, should we address this shortage as preventative measures for bones being thin or accelerated aging for post-op people of trans experience? Should we look to natural options such as food and fruits that have similar benefits? That was it. Those are the questions.
I can address that last bit. I've talked to several sort of naturopathic doctors about phytoestrogens and food-based estrogens. They're not as effective as pharmaceutical estrogens, so they're not going to be giving the same effect, which is, I've also been encouraging everyone who I see who's post-operative, who has had their gonads removed for orchiectomy or vaginoplasty to stay on some form of estrogen, be it patches or pills. We have to remember that there are other ways to get estrogen, and those ways still have a lot of the same benefits.
What trans advocacy groups are out there raising awareness about this? And there are also a lot of folks in the room that we're about to wrap up in a little bit to have that breakout, so you guys can collaborate and figure out what next steps you may know, so that we can write up the board and talk. But I'm going to read some more questions. But to answer those questions, what are some advocacy groups? As I spoke with Sasha, so I know Sasha is working on something. I know Callen-Lorde, we have our trans up group, and we really fish out the issues that are at Callen-Lorde and how it translates outside of other places and how it can impact, and really to ground around collaborating with folks so that we can create a unified message around this. All right, and how do we get actively involved in making sure we get the medicines we need? All right, so actively involved. I say definitely reach out to all agencies that should provide trans care. Also, you want to check out in your local CAB, which is community advisory boards. You want to sit on that and really see what can you bring to the table and contribute. What do you know of? Who are some folks you can bring to the table? It's really about collaboration. But I also want to read another question on the back of this. It says, how do we translate our concern and outrage into the EpiPen phenomenon, media, legally attention? I don't know the answer to something like that.
I think it's a really good analogy, and I don't know the answer either, but I thought of that too, because there's a lot of outrage about, if anybody doesn't know, I think EpiPen just went from like $100 to what, like 500 or 700, like overnight, and there's a lot of outrage about that. And I agree, I think there should be the same amount of outrage about this. Currently there isn't, but I think that's why we're here. To figure out.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Alright, so major needs. Alright. Next question is FDA advocacy action, question mark. What does it look like, question mark? In parentheses, it says fast trade procedures. Can we speak to that, if any? No? Okay. Next question. Alternatives, methods to inform those outside the city, which we kind of circled around already. How will they involve? And if I'm reading this question wrong, please know that this is a safe space for you to be able to stand up and say, hey, you're reading the question wrong. I want to create that space for everyone to make sure that their answers are being met in the capacity of what we know. Also, how will providers be notified so that people can get their prescription? And I think that question is framed around the, and I may be wrong, so you can tell me if I'm wrong, around the other alternative, which was the stop Hector? Stroke Hector? Yeah. How would you be notified? How would folks be notified about this?
I mean, I think, I worry that there may be providers who don't know that there's a shortage because there hasn't been a lot of media around it, and there's also maybe providers who don't know that they can write substitutes. I mean, as a provider, you write a prescription, you send someone to the pharmacy, sometimes they don't have it, and then they were like, oh, come back, but the message doesn't go back, and then the changes don't get made. So I think hopefully there'll be a bit more media around this. Yeah, okay.
All right, and in terms of alternative medications, so we know that there are alternate, right, and other ways. What would you suggest to patients that are taking this switch over from estrogen or injectables to the pills or the patch? How would you monitor their endocrines and what that bone difference may look like? What would that look like with the switch? What should you recommend to providers?
So, generally there's what we call kind of equivalent doses. So, for example, if you're on, again, 40 milligrams every 2 weeks, there's a kind of an equivalent amount of estrogen in pills or in patches. So, but it's not exact, right? Because everyone absorbs things differently and digests things differently. So, generally after you've made the change, it's a good idea to check hormone levels. It's not mandatory, but it's a good idea. Not everyone can afford the cost of doing additional blood work.
generally, if people feel good, I think that's fine. Changes in bone don't happen overnight, so that, you know, I wouldn't do those types of tests right away. But the hormone level is definitely something you can check very, very quickly, actually.
Well, and it's also going to feel different. When you take a shot of estrogen, you have a very high estrogen level very quickly, and then that tapers off over the course of 1 week or 2 week cycle. So if you are used to that, it's going to feel different when you're taking a pill. You're not going to have that sort of peak and then crash. It's going to be a steadier supply of estrogen. So it really does feel different, and you might be able to feel the difference. But it's also an inexact science in terms of checking levels with someone who's on an injection. Do you take their blood right after they get a shot and get a really high level? Do you take their blood right before they're about to do a shot and get a really low level? You know, so that's why there's an art as much as there is a science to this, and you should be having conversations with your healthcare providers, not just about what your levels are and monitoring your levels, but how you feel with the switch. Whether or not you're noticing changes, whether or not you feel like you're losing ground in terms of body changes, or losing ground in terms of mental health.
Alright, awesome. So we have 25 minutes. So in this part, feel free, and I want to give you the option to say yes or no, but honestly, we would love for you to actually look around the room and circle up, this group circle up, that group circle up, and really think of action steps or what next steps that you may know of, any requests that you have, so that we can actually fish that out. We're going to do that for like 15 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to write down, and then we're going to share. How does that sound? Yes. Awesome. So you all can break out amongst the space that you have.
So in the past, when you know, the estrogen, the brand name was short, the company that made the generic was still making the generic. So you probably remember a time when folks were being told, well, we don't have estrogen, but we have injectable estradiol made by another company that wasn't brand name. So, and that's what we also do with other medications. If one company stops producing, there are usually a dozen other companies that make the same medication. Unfortunately, with the injectable, there are only 2 companies, and they both stopped producing at the same time, more or less, in the same, at least within the same, year.